Welcome once again to Musings by Danon. Today we're going to continue our series on different commander archetypes. We've already covered Enchantress, Group Hug, and Wheel decks. Today I wanted to go over extra turns or extra combats. The reason I included these two together is that even though they are different colors, the play patterns are very similar. The goal of the deck is to keep your opponents from winning until you can combo off and win in a single turn. Whether you're stacking them out, controlling the board, or making yourself appear to be non-threatening until you can suddenly win the game, there are many viable strategies. Before we get started, please like and subscribe. It really does help the channel out. For the most part, extra turn spells are blue, while extra combat spells are red. Yes, there are exceptions, but nearly all the non-blue extra turn spells come with a drawback, often the loss of the game. Blue's Illusionist Gambit isn't really an extra combat step so much as a combat reset button, but Boros has both Aurelia and Response Resurgence. You also have Finest Hour, but that sees play almost exclusively in Voltron decks. Doing a video on extra turns is an option. I have a Scarab God extra turns deck, my wife has a Niv Mizzet Perun's turns deck, and my good friend Jiraiya has an amazing Kefnet turns deck. However, turn spells are not cheap. You want a few in your deck, plus some tutors to find them. So while it may be possible to build an extra turns deck on a budget, most of the good extra turn spells start in the $20 range. Not to mention good tutors cost anywhere from $20 to $50. So that means today we'll be building an extra combat deck. Therefore, we absolutely want red in our commander's color identity. I could do an Aurelia extra combats deck, but my friend Commander Replay has already done plenty of content on that. If you're not subscribed to him, check out his channel here. We'll start with the $100 version, then throw in some upgrades. But even with only $100, there are several combos in the deck that give you infinite attacks. We'll start with our commander, Wulfgar of Icewind Dale. Wulfgar was a new card printed in the Draconic Rage pre-constructed commander deck. He's a 5-mana 4/4 with melee, and if a creature you control attacking would cause a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. So to take full use of Wulfgar, we need to be both in control of the triggered permanents and the attacking creature. So cards like Shiny Impetus would only trigger once. I want to go for a budget list. I tried to go for a $50 version, but I just couldn't make it work. So instead, we'll have a $100 version. After we build our budget list, I'll offer suggestions for upgrades and what I'd replace. As always, we'll be building our deck, then comparing it to our checklist to ensure we didn't miss any key pieces. 50 mana sources, split between lands and ramp, usually 37 lands and 13 pieces of ramp. 10 pieces of card advantage, 8 to 10 spot removal, 2 pieces of graveyard hate, 2 to 3 board wipes, and 1 Surprise Eye win card. You'll note that I've changed tutors to graveyard hate. Tutors aren't really an option when building a budget deck, but you never know what other players are trying to do. So with that change, let's start building our deck. With Wulfgar at our helm, we're looking at cards that trigger on attacking as well as extra combat steps. So to start, let's look at a few extra combat cards and see what we can come up with. Since we're on a budget, we're going with Morag, Fury of Akum, Hellkite Charger, Fury of the Horde, Lightning Runner, and Relentless Assault. Lightning Runner, along with Wulfgar, eventually gives us 2 combat steps every turn, but Hellkite Charger, with the right setup, goes infinite. More on that in a bit. We're also wanting to make sure our creatures have haste, so we have Rhythm of the Wild, Hammer of Purphoros, Fires of Yavimaya, and Anger in our deck. Our deck can be a little mana intensive, so we've got some creatures that add mana as an attack trigger in Grand Warlord Rada, Captain Lannery Storm, Hoarding Ogre, Conduit of Storms, and Savage Ventmaw. To clear the path so we can attack our opponents, we have Clamor Shaman, Inferno Titan, and Dracuseth Maw of Flames. We also want to deal as much damage as possible whenever we swing out. So to help with that, we've got a bunch of creatures that pump our team. And thanks to Wulfgar, all those pumps happen twice. Bolthound, Fengryn Firstborn, as well as Fengryn Pathcutter for Trample, and Cultivator of Blades, which gives our entire team +6/+6 with Wulfgar. Goreclaw, Terror of Kalsisma, both pumps our team, and makes our bigger creatures cheaper to cast. Delina Wildmage will copy our creatures at least twice, giving us a bigger board. We won't get the attack triggers from the copied creatures, but more damage is always nice. Hellrider also helps us close out games faster, dealing damage before blocks are declared. Deathgorge Scavenger and Graven Abomination serve as repeatable graveyard hate, while Goblin Traprunner and Krenko 10 Street Kingpin both create an army of goblins. Kogla the Titan Ape can clear out annoying enchantments and artifacts, and can be used to save our commander in a pinch. Goblin Racketeer is useful for goading creatures we want pointed at our opponents instead of us. Tectonic Giant serves as both card advantage and extra damage. Wildfire Eternal lets us cheat a whole bunch of spells into play, but Atali Primal Storm might be the scariest card in our deck. We can cast up to 8 spells for free from a single attack with a Tali, and hopefully we're doing it more than once per turn. As far as interaction goes, I've already mentioned Rhythm of the Wild, Goblin Racketeer, Kogla, and Dracuseth, but I've also included Beast Within, Chaos Warp, Reclamation Sage, Swiftfoot Boots, Hull Breach, and Abrade. I was looking for budget options for one-sided board wipes with Gruul, but I couldn't find any. However, I did come across a card from Ikoria, Thwart the Enemy. For card advantage, we've got Bomat Courier, Chaos Channeler, Garruk's Uprising, Dragonborn Champion, Harmonize, Rishkar's Expertise, Werewolf Pack Leader, and Outpost Siege. Since many of our strongest creatures, including 2 that give us extra combats, have 6 mana value, we're including Fierce Empath as a budget tutor option. The first mana ramp card I added to the list was Sword of the Animist. Remember, Wulfgar triggers permanents, so that means Sword of the Animist searches for 2 basics. The second card I added was Druid's Repository. This card is one of our combo pieces that will enable infinite combats under the right circumstances. With Wulfgar, Hellkite Charger, and at least 2 other attacking creatures, and a Druid's Repository on board, when you attack, you first put Hellkite's trigger on the stack, then Druid's Repository's trigger. You add at least 8 counters to Druid's Repository, remove 7 of them to pay for Hellkite Charger's trigger. Repeat ad nauseum. Of course, you could also use mana from Warlord Rada or Savage Vengeful to pay for Hellkite Charger's ability. Cryptolith Fragment is a fun little mana rock in our deck. It's not the fastest, but if we can transform it, it will help us close out games faster. Goblin and Archomancer is a wonderful inclusion, and we have our usual ramp package in Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, Cultivate, Nature's Lore, Rampant Growth, Farseek, Explore, 3 Visits, and Domri Anarch of Bolas. I tried to go for cheaper 2-mana ramp spells as opposed to the bigger 4-mana ones that get us 2 lands into play. A new land that works well with Wulfgar is Den of the Bugbear, creating 2 tokens for us instead of 1. We've got Rogue's Passage to ensure no one blocks our commander, a command tower, and a host of budget dual-colored lands. We're also running Terramorphic Expanse, Myriad Landscape, and Evolving Wilds to give Morag extra triggers. I could have gone for more basics, but we have 2 cards with triple green in their casting cost, and 1 triple red, so I felt having the right colors on a budget was more important. So we're running 11 of the cheaper dual-color lands. For basics, we have 11 mountains and 9 forests. So let's go ahead and check our list. 50 mana sources? Check, we've got 37 lands and 15 pieces of ramp. Most of those generate mana or treasure tokens when attacking, so they have extra value with Wulfgar. 10 pieces of card advantage? We're only at 8, so we missed the mark a little. However, 5 of them are repeatable, allowing us to loot through our deck or draw many cards. Interaction? We have 12. 5 pieces of traditional spot removal, 2 cards that prevent our creatures from being countered, 5 more that either remove threats or force the threats to be pointed elsewhere, and 1 planeswalker that gives us a fight mechanic, and a pair of boots. Graveyard Hate. Both repeatable. Neither clear an entire graveyard, but with our commander on board, we're clearing 2 cards every turn. Board wipes. 0. Maybe 1 if we count Thwart the Enemy. 1 Surprise I Win card. We don't have a single card that wins us the game, but several infinite combos, so I'm going to count those. So with the exception of board wipes, this deck checks all the boxes. I'd love to have some tutors in the deck to fetch out our combat pieces, so I think that's what we'll look at adding first. After we figure out what we want in the deck, then we'll go through and figure out what we're cutting. So let's take a look at possible tutors. We could go with Birthing Pod, but we want to attack our enemies with as many creatures as possible, so we'll avoid it along with any tutors that sack our creatures, like Magus of the Order or Natural Order. The only creature we really want in our graveyard is Anger, which isn't green. However, Eldritch Evolution may be a possibility. We're going to be turning our creatures sideways a lot, so planeswalkers that rely on their ultimates are probably not a good option, as we won't have blockers to help protect them. My general rule with adding planeswalkers to decks is how good are their first 2 abilities, and the static ability if they have one. You rarely get to ult a planeswalker in Commander, so I always make sure that the abilities you can immediately activate are good fits for the deck. So that means Garruk Unleashed is probably not a good fit, but Garruk Caller of Beasts might work. We're not really a graveyard deck, so I'm hesitant to run Traverse the Ulvenwald. Same with Fauna Shaman. I really like Worldly Tutor, but even with its recent reprint, the card is still very expensive. With only 2 token generators, Court of Calling probably isn't the best inclusion. We could pair our Fierce Empath with a Sword of Hearthenhome and maybe include a Brutalizer Exarch, but we're not an ETB deck, so I don't think we should limit ourselves. Instead, I think we're going to go with Summoner's Pact, Ecological Appreciation, and Green Sun Zenith. The next thing I wanted to upgrade was the land and ramp package. We're not going to go crazy with the price here, but I did want to include cards like Stomping Ground, Rootbound Crag, Spire Garden, Fabled Passage, Yavimaya Cradle of Growth, and Raging Ravine. Our ramp package was actually pretty good to begin with, but I'd like to add a Skyshroud Claim, Old Gnawbone, and a Growing Rites of Itlimoc. Normally I don't like to run 4 mana ramp pieces, but Skyshroud Claim gets us 2 forests, and now we have 3 dual-colored lands that it can target. Growing Rites also serves double duty as card advantage, and Old Gnawbone can generate enough mana to win games. As far as card advantage goes, there are several options. I did test cards like Colossal Majesty and Elemental Bond, but without creatures on board they're just do-nothing enchantments. I am a fan of Beast Whisperer, but in nearly all the games it's rare that we'll be casting more than 1 creature per turn. So instead I went with Eternal Witness, Toski Bearer of Secrets, and Greater Good. We're not really a graveyard deck, but Greater Good lets us get some value out of creatures when our opponents use spot removal, and we have no other ways of protecting them. Our interaction package is also getting some upgrades, namely Heroic Intervention, Decimate, and Lightning Greaves. Extra combats have a lot of options. I looked at Zariel, Archduke of Avernus, Seize the Day, and Combat Celebrant, but wasn't a huge fan of any of them. Zariel is great if we could ever get her to Ultimate. Seize the Day only untaps a single creature, so it's better in a Voltron-style deck. And Combat Celebrant only works once every other turn. Instead, I'm looking at World at War, which gives us 2 extra combats over the course of 2 turns. Port Razor, Scourge of the Throne, Aggravated Assault, and Seed Time. Seed Time will sometimes be a do-nothing card because you will occasionally be at a table where no one is playing blue. However, most of the time there will be someone, and getting to take an extra turn for only 2 mana is amazing. Now as far as core upgrades, I think that Handwear Battlements and Handwear Garrison are both fun cards and good with our deck on their own. If we ever get them to merge, they're going to be amazing, but it's fine if that never happens. Bear Umbra is an extremely strong upgrade. I would love to include Goldspan Dragon, because it would make us 6 extra mana the turn it comes into play, plus 4 additional mana every time it attacks, and it makes Captain Lannery Storm even better. But it's currently $40 and probably won't drop in price for a while. Elder Gargaroth lets us draw 2 cards every time it attacks, while Erlharg puts 2 creatures tapped and attacking out for free. But probably the biggest upgrade to this deck is Pathbreaker Ibex, a card I would have loved to include in the budget version, but it's over $20. I was also looking at Beastmaster Ascension, but I feel that's better in a go-wide strategy. We should be attacking with numerous creatures per turn, but to add it we'd have to cut a creature, and I don't want to do that. So now comes the hard part. What are we taking out? More importantly, which upgrades should I go for first? Extra combat decks are, at their heart, a combo deck, so I would first go for adding tutors. The first cuts I would make are Fierce Empath for Ecological Appreciation, then Rishkar's Expertise for Summoner Pact, and finally Bomat Courier for Green Sun's Zenith. Next I would like to upgrade the extra combat effects. We are cutting 3, but adding 5. The ones I wanted to cut are the ones that only give us 1 extra combat effect. So Fury of the Horde is getting replaced with Aggravated Assault, Relentless Assault becomes World at War, and Lightning Runner gets swapped out for Port Razor. Because we're losing some spells, I felt it was right to drop Wildfire Eternal and put in Scourge of the Throne. Finally, Clamor Shaman gets replaced by Seed Time. Now I'd like to take a look at upgrading our Mana Ramp and Lands package. Fortunately, this is a straight 1-for-1 exchange. Cryptolith Fragment, which is clunky and unreliable, becomes Skyshroud Claim, Domri, Anarch of Bolas, becomes Growing Rites of Itlimoc, and Explorer gets replaced with Old Gnawbone. As far as lands go, we're changing out a Rugged Highland for a Handwear Battlements, a Gruul Turf for a Stomping Grounds, Gruul Guildgate becomes Rootbound Crag, Highland Weald is now a Spire Garden. These upgrades come at a pretty hefty cost, but now we have 3 more lands that don't come into play untapped. Additionally, we're going to drop a Kazandu Refuge for a Fabled Passage, Shivan Oasis for a Yavimaya Cradle of Growth, and a Timber Gorge for a Raging Ravine. Not only is it another dual-colored land, but we can activate it, and it gets bigger and bigger every time we swing out with it. For our card advantage upgrades, I would swap out Dragonborn Champion for Toski Bearer of Secrets, Harmonize gets upgraded to Greater Good, and for the last slot, I would cut a Conduit of Storms for an Eternal Witness. We will be cutting a Braid for Decimate. Yes, it's more expensive mana-wise, but it hits 4 targets instead of 1. Reclamation Sage comes out for Heroic Intervention. Being able to survive a board wipe I feel is more important than destroying a single artifact or enchantment at sorcery speed. And finally, Goblin Racketeer becomes Lightning Greaves. Finally, we can look at upgrading the core of the deck. Fires of Yavimaya becomes Ilharg the Razeboar. Bolthound gets upgraded to Pathbreaker Ibex. Fenguin Firstborn is now Bear Umbra. Inferno Titan becomes an Elder Gargaroth, and finally Hellrider gets replaced by Handwear Garrison. Now all of these upgrades are optional, and the total will bring you to over $380. So if you like the budget version of this deck, Try to figure out where the weaknesses of the deck are for your meta. Every commander group is a little bit different. I tend to run a lot of artifact and enchantment hate because both my good friend Jiraiya and my daughter love stacks pieces. However, a deck with a lot of enchantment hate doesn't do well in other playgroups. The point is, this deck is a lot of fun to play, and there are many ways to upgrade it, but the final version is the one I'll be bringing to my LGS. Thanks for tuning in. It was a lot of fun to talk about Wulfgar and Extra Combats. If you have an Extra Combat deck, or an Extra Turns deck of your own that you'd like to share, please do so in the comments below. Once again, I'd like to give a huge shout out to my editor Cute Stuff. I couldn't make these videos without her. If you'd like to hire her to edit your own videos, there's a link to her Fiverr page below. Please like and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you all again next time.